And there we are. Hi everyone, welcome. Conversation community dynamic synopsis. Let's see, I should just explain that possibly. The conversation community started in November 2012. It has now grown to almost 900 members. Not sure really how that happened, but kind of word got around probably. And the dynamic synopsis thing is the only pinned post in the conversation community. So big thanks to Google in its almighty wisdom for allowing us to actually pin at least one post, because all the others are basically just vanishing because we're a pretty prolific bunch and I'm the worst of the lot. So let's see if we can sort of explain very quickly what I mean with the dynamic synopsis. Well, synopsis is kind of the pinned post, the kind of the gist of the whole conversation community, and there's links and plus mention of names there to serve as kind of a jumping off point to find stuff inside the community. The dynamic thing, well, there's two ways of looking at dynamic. One is kind of, I half jokingly, half seriously said that I put a Beatles GIF in this kind of very invitation to this event to sort of indicate that I'm basically an old geezer. I have older siblings. We all listen to the Beatles, and I basically never stopped doing that. So I usually listen to Beatles quite a lot when I write posts. But I do try to behave, not post too much about the Beatles, because it's kind of, well, these days could almost be seen as an acquired taste. But the whole conversation community is slightly simpler. It's basically kind of a collective imagineering, kind of the what if thing. So what if conversations can be characterized by curiosity, inclusivity, and agency? Now, agency is the simplest part, so I start there. If we just have only agency in the conversation, that's basically a debate. Or if we're slightly more polite, or at least pretend to be, a discussion. But if we add a sufficient inclusivity, as we actually give a damn about what the other people are on about, where they're from, what's their story, what do they hope to gain from the conversation, so that typically the conversation benefits from that. And curiosity is both kind of a curiosity towards other people, to basically that we ask them generative questions, not only sort of satisfy our curiosity, but also to sort of have a back and forth in a good conversation and a dialogue. But also a curiosity to remember that we can sort of tweak the box so it's likely more open than the typical, here's my talking points, and when I've said them, I'm going to sort of press stop the recording, and then you're off, right? So this is the tricky part, because you basically never know what happens in a conversation. Someone sort of goes off on a tangent, and someone is going to sort of do their hobby horse, or John Kelden is going to talk everyone's ears off, and all kinds of mayhem can happen in a conversation. But if the conversationalists, the participants, learn after a while that with a modicum of curiosity, inclusivity, and with sort of also a modicum of agency, good conversations can typically be had. Now, curiosity, inclusivity, agency are also, for me, deeply rooted in rhythm, which I'm very grateful that we have one of the experts of rhythm and music and melody and sort of finding enjoyment beyond personal taste in Ron Scroggin. It's also rooted in both personality and character. And that's kind of all why I'm grateful for why we have Craig Calvert here, because he's one of those resident masters of MBTI and loads of other things to do with personality. And the personality word is one of those kind of tricky things, right? I mean, it's good to have a nice personality. I mean, the colloquial term of the word, right? But keeping in mind the spirit of the dynamic synopsis, I've actually put some people in the dynamic synopsis in itself. Those are not sort of topic hosts, but they are kind of resident conversationalists. So I've sort of looked at them throughout many conversations in the conversation community, and I've found that they can usually be, if asked nicely, clue in other people on sort of what's going on in a particular topic, whether it's learning or narrative or any one else of the topics in the conversation community. And that's pretty much it. I mean, I could go on for hours on my sort of particular fave topics, but I mean, the dynamic synopsis is, well, we could sort of do a further step to sort of apply it. I mean, why and where to of the conversation community? Well, there's three things here, and one is resonance. I mean, resonance is one of those tricky things, right? Resonance in between people that can usually be at least scaffolded, initiated, scaffolded, and eventually also kind of partially realized through conversation. I mean, we can talk with others and find out if we like and trust each other, if all goes well. So resonance is an important thing, which is also important in terms of network literacy and also in network effectiveness. Basically, sorting out all the deadbeats and blueheads and just have conversations with those people who are of a more kind of human, meaningful persuasion. People who are kind of that we find meaningful to talk with, and they find meaningful to talk with us back. So, and since I'm fond of doing these three-word thingies, so with the two other R words beyond resonance is then reciprocity and reach. So reciprocity is then what happens after some kind of a sufficient resonance. There's a reciprocity going back and forth. We exchange stories, insights, words, comments, something. And once we've done that a couple of thousand times, there is kind of a more or less a reach, depending on how resonant we are and how sort of reciprocal we are. I mean, word gets around. John has something to say about biosemiotics. Craig Calvert has something to say about personality theory. Ron Scroggin has something to say about music. And my very fact of mentioning this is sort of very deliberate, right? I mean, I'm seeing here that Manny St. Victor has sort of joined in. I think he's silent. He sort of pinged me before that he's going to be basically just taking notes. So if there's anything to do with neuroscience, or game development for that matter, you should probably go ask Manny St. Victor nicely, and he will clue in on those matters. And Christopher, maybe I should just hand the floor over to you guys now and start with you, Christopher, because and if you could unmute your microphone, because truth be told, I don't know your expertise, so I can't sort of say anything intelligently about it.
Well, my expertise really comes in the world of behavioral marketing. I worked for 26 years in clinical practice, medical practice, and recently left that to create a software company and consulting firm that deals with gamification. In other words, taking the motivational triggers that make games so incredibly addictive and engaging and layering them into non-game situations, typically businesses and organizations. So we look at creating greater engagement, undying loyalty, and basically greater revenue for business.
That's very cool. I mean, basically making it more fun and meaningful to click on things and
right, because boring businesses die fast.
Yeah, that's a really good catchphrase, really.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. I mean, also they should probably die, right? I mean, not that I'm not in the business of actually killing businesses. That kind of not my, at least that's not my main business. But I mean, as a nice side effect, it's so, and I mean, these things could possibly be important. I mean, I've sort of gotten frequently asked the question, what are you on about really in the conversation community? Which is one of those really nice questions, right? Because you really don't know really how to answer it. Are we a cult? Are we an exclusive club? Are we a group of strange brainiacs? Well, you could possibly, depending on how you see it, say yes to all of the above, right? But from where I'm sitting, if that sort of means anything at all, I'm basically just very much focused on exploring. I mean, to give you kind of how I started, I'll give you a backdrop on that. I've been a member in something called a virtual community, which was started by Howard Rheingold. And he started in 1998. I joined 2001, and I'm still a member. Which means that now, goodness, it's 13 years of membership in the virtual community. So I've done quite a lot of things. and they were gracious enough to suffer me, being Swedish and all, right? And it took me a couple of years to learn American English codes. And before that, they made loads of fun about me, and I suffered that graciously, and then I sort of became one of the gang. Now, and pretty much half of what goes on in the conversation community is stuff I learned by practice, kind of action learning, hands-on stuff. How can you build meaningful connectivity through just text? I mean, a confession here. I mean, Brainstorm still runs on Caucus. And for those who knows platforms, Caucus is one of those kind of, this is not MP3, dear viewers, listeners. This is kind of vinyl in terms of online and virtual community things, right? But it's still cool, right? It still does the trick. So in the conversation community, there's this intention of getting it to work mostly through self-organizing without having to throw out too many people. So there's close to 900 people there, and I've been kind of the fearless leader and the sole arbiter, and I've thrown out, I think, 4 or 5 people, depending on how you count. So, well, I'm not happy with throwing out people, but that, I mean, it's a good, sensible, transparent metric, right? So you know that you need to be extremely offensive to be thrown out, right? So please don't be. And in terms of behavior, this is also something that people kind of message me privately. I mean, it's understandably so that these messages are private, right? Can I solicit stuff? Well, yes, if it's conversational in spirit. Can I talk at length about my stuff? Yes, if it's conversational in spirit, right? Because the only remit that the conversation community has is we aim to pool as much of our sort of collective intelligence, community intelligence, collaborative intelligence, whatever co-intelligence we have, into rekindle and rediscover and revitalize conversations. But typically, people who do solicit stuff, they basically just sort of stand on their own soapbox and shout to the unwashed hordes. And that you can't do. So this is kind of where we're kind of actually exploring online behavior hands-on in the actual conversations. I should probably mention what I mean with the conversation. I mean, I also touched upon this in terms of if we just do agency, I mean, basically doesn't give a damn about other people. I mean, debate is the good working cultural standard for that, right? Basically trying to take the mickey out of anyone else and getting your shouting points, talking points in, and then there's that. I mean, this is not a bad thing if you're basically a politician or if you're in Hyde Park in this kind of the soapbox corner or whatever it's called. But in a network, you can typically get better collaborative and more intelligent behavior out of other people if you do conversations, and then you can progress to skillful conversations. And then from skillful conversations, you can progress from dialogue, and then from there you can progress to metalogue. And there's actually even a step beyond, which I've actually teased out from the collective intelligence from the conversationalists themselves, which I'm tentatively calling co-efficacy. So this is where the conversationalist sort of grace to you talking with me, or rather us talking with each other, we're kind of at the absolute bleeding edge of things in terms of what sort of happens in the digital space. I mean, co-efficacy isn't actually a word yet. I just made that up, right? Because I knew that there was kind of a next level, because we're already doing it. So it needs a new word. And beyond co-efficacy even, then it's basically just collective intelligence. And collective intelligence is not as woo-woo and as strange and as mystic as it might sound. It's basically, my great image for that is a jazz trio. So if you've ever heard Sven Asmussen trio, you know perfectly well what collective intelligence is, because it makes for a really great, really resonant, synchronous performance. So this is where the behavior gets so intelligent. So a small group of people, or for instance, or obviously also a larger group of people, a symphony orchestra, for instance, can perform in a really, really collectively intelligent and deeply meaningful and valuable way. I mean, it's kind of the wet dream of all managers and executives, right? To have their whole company, and all the employees, all the stakeholders, partners, suppliers, and whatnot perform as if on cue, right? As if a kind of a symphony, kind of orchestrated whole. Now, the old 20th century way of doing this is basically instilling fear in your loyal subjects, and that works up until a point, right? I should probably mention one of those kind of what's wrong with instilling fear in your loyal subjects, because the networks happen. Now, John Hagel mentioned something that I sort of took to heart, right? And he said that in this day and age, some of your key talent lives outside your corporate firewall. So this means that you can instill fear in your loyal subjects as much as you want and be as clever as you want about it. That really doesn't cut it anymore, because some of the people you really want to have on board as well can then just go tell you to go stuff it, and then kind of the whole organizing kind of scheme sort of falls flat on its face, right? Now, Ron Scroggin has actually a working approach for how to deal with that in terms of sort of resonance. So there's a project underway in the conversation called Project Mixtape, and he can sort of clue in all about that later on once we've turned this little send into a post, and I will sort of plus mention you, and we can sort of have all the conversations and questions that we didn't get to cram in, because I mean, I warned you, right? I talk too much. Craig can fill you in on the self-awareness required to make for a better transition from a slightly more institution-centric worldview in the 20th century to a more network-centric behavior in the 21st century. And I'm basically simplifying here. I mean, this has been going on for a while, right? I mean, it wasn't like the web happened yesterday, but there's a lag time involved. So most people still believe that Facebook is just for teens, and Google Plus, I mean, no one has even heard about it, and you can't actually have intelligent conversations in the Google Plus Hangout, right? So there's lag time for all these sort of newfangled things happening. But
if I could ask a question,
yeah,
John.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, because one of the things that I like to get in is the philosophy that many people have that there's an objective definition of a good conversation. Like, for example, I can say from a personality type perspective that Google Plus is very driven by intuition and logic. It's not that there are no other mental functions going on in the Google Plus universe, but I mean, I'm just talking a propensity, sort of a flow. You get into Facebook, and you're getting more of a sensory, feeling, emotional connection perspective. And again, not saying that there isn't intuition and logic going on there, but we have these channels. And there are people that would be sitting in this conversation just lapping it up, having a grand time going, this is beautiful. And I could just as easily find 5 people going, what in the hell are you guys talking about? This is driving me nuts. There is no objective definition of a good, conversation. To me, it's about cognitive alignment. And I'd love to get, hover over here, Chris's opinion on this one, because part of having a connection with someone is that if their brain is hungry for a particular kind of mental stimulus, and you give them another stimulus, then they're left hungry, and there's no addiction, there's no connection.
Yeah. I just go to say hi to Akira. Hi, welcome. Well, it's a really essential point, right? Where there's no one correct definition of a conversation. I mean, I have mine. I define conversations as anything that happens in between mindfulness and effective convivial action. Now, that covers an awful lot of ground, right? And it basically kind of my little cue that it sort of takes a whole village, right, to get the whole conversation going. It's like, I think it was it Carl Sagan that said, if you want an apple, you need to sort of build the whole universe around it. Something like that, right? I mean, sort of taking into account that there's context, and then there's context, and then there's some more context, and then there's context up the wazoo, and even more context. So in a way, but all those who now try to sort of peddle their wares and say, I have the sort of secret sauce in terms of context, whether they are Scoble or anyone else, right? That's there was an author that said, forgot his name now. I will add that name in the post later on. We said that when people tell you that you are wrong, they are probably right. But when people then go on telling you, this is with precision all those particulars where you are wrong, then they are probably wrong and you are right. And it's such a beautiful little sort of piece of advice, right? I mean, to give my personal context for that, I mean, I was a bit clueless what to do. I wanted to start a Google Plus community. I wanted to grow resonance, reciprocity, and reach, and get sort of rich and famous, and doing this Google Plus thing, and so on. Everyone else wants to do that, right? I mean, we human, we want shortcuts. We want people to click on the buy button, and we want to be liked for it as well, right? Now, what did I do? Well, since I'm of a very peculiar persuasion, I'm very prolific, I wrote 9,000 Google Plus posts. It was basically a stretch goal, right? I took a couple of months and then said, can I actually read 100 blog posts a day, and can I cram out 10 blog posts of my own each day? And, well, I did, right? And here I am. The interesting thing was that in order to actually be able to do that, I needed to dodge my inner editor. I mean, to give you context on that, I grew up in a very strange family. I mean, it was Swedish, but I mean, strange even for Swedish means. So I was expected to read French, English, and Russian classics by the age of 6, 7. And I started to play the violin by the age of 8, and I drew architectural blueprints by the age of 9. So not your typical even Swedish family. So when I undertook this sort of stretch goal and writing this sort of plethora of posts, I was sort of well armed to do so, right? I can have an opinion on most anything. I can have an opinion even on something I don't know anything about, because my background expertise in almost everything allows me to sort of cover the gaps, right? So this means, my point was that my inner editor, I mean, if I mess on a good day and then on my nicest behavior, I'm pretty fearsome, right? My inner editor, you don't ever want to meet him, right? So I needed to dodge my inner editor, because otherwise I would never have been able to cram out all that god-awful lot of stuff. And when I did, I realized, kind of was a side effect, that I could sort of begin to extend trust and get trust reciprocated back from people, because all my stuff was of very, very varied and varying quality. Now, some of the stuff I wrote, which I sort of spent hours and hours and sometimes days, that was just sank like a stone. So I thought it was brilliant. All the others thought it was crap, right? So this is kind of a nice little learning thing, right? Post by post. Some other things I just smashed together in 10 seconds. People thought that, wow, this is the best thing since sliced bread. Wow, let's do a bit more of that then. Now, the interesting thing here is that you need to have kind of a very particular goal, because if I only would have gone from popular opinion, I would only have done by now cat gifts or cats and bacon or whatever we want to call it, right? Kind of a race to the bottom. And if you go look through the public stream and Google Plus, any which given day, any which given moment, you will see that this is a popular strategy. So, but in order to get resonance and reciprocity and reach, I mean both fame and fortune and being well liked, you might want to add additional tweaks to that sort of race to the bottom strategy, right? You need to sort of see.
Honestly, yeah.
It's very difficult to sort of say with precision what your own unique strategy should be, right? Because it depends. I mean, let's say I aim for 300,000 followers. I mean, I actually have that as kind of a concrete goal, right? Then I know what to do to get there. But if someone else wants to get 300 followers, the strategies in terms of reach, reciprocity, and resonance should be very differently recombined and optimized. Now, mind you, even though I think it would be very cool to have 300,000 followers, I have now an attitude of 28, 29,000, I think. That doesn't mean that that is any which way objectively more valuable or meaningful than having 300. But we need to set these goals, or at least I think so, because if we don't, we kind of tend to be eaten by this whole sort of social media machine. We need to have very strong in a direction, in a compass, in a something to sort of be able to withstand this sort of onslaught, the content fire hose. So in order for me to get to 300,000, I need to do an amount of signaling to basically tell other people, as many as possible, that even though I do biosemiotics and strategy and complexity and wayfinding and all those other stuff that basically no one has ever almost
Where
never
do you
heard
get
of.
your conviction, John?
Sorry?
Where do you get your conviction?
The conviction? Well,
Yeah.
That's a really great question. Well, I have a mantra. It's the closest thing, right? I think. I mean, my religion is very simple. I sort of believe in nature. And that sort of basically covers it, right? That's kind of my full spirituality, my full religion kind of been summed up. I believe in nature.
What's your definition of nature? Like the surface look of nature, or do you believe there is something beyond nature?
Well, the sum total of it, from Big Bang to quarks to quasars and everything in between, right?
And before Big Bang too.
Yeah, but I mean, my mantra is very simple to define. I mean, because I mean, if you have me elaborate, I can sort of grow really weird really quickly and go into biosemiotics, and then you will never be able to sort of shut me up. So I won't go there, at least not today. But my mantra is simpler, and that is basically 3 short sentences, 2 questions and a kind of a statement. The first question is, "We made it?" question mark. The second question is, "What happened?" question mark. And the third sentence is, "We happened." Now, if I would just have that "we happened," I would turn into a very boring, obnoxious guru, right? And no one would sort of be sensible to sort of, you should stay a mile away from me, right? At least. But the 2 questions are kind of the redeeming qualities, right? It's me kind of trying to signal that I actually don't know. I mean, I could sort of be the smartest guy on the planet and having the brain the size of a small planet. That doesn't matter in the slightest. That doesn't cut it, right? But maybe if I get to 300,000 people, and out of there, I can sort of distill 1% of those 3,000 people that actually do give a damn about sort of figuring out collectively meaningful answers to those 2 questions. Then we might be able to sort of to give you context on that. I did an interview with Howard Rheingold recently. I haven't been able to sort of put it in the post yet, but I will. And basically the core question I posed to him was, are we fucked up beyond redemption, or are we going to make it?
Well, you know, I think there is a chance, and I think to cook an interesting meal, you need a small pot. You know, you can't cook an interesting meal in a very large pot. So I think numbers are not that important. They are important. Like the pot has to be reasonable size, and the materials you use have to be of similar reasonable quantity. But you can't go for a really big pot and really big fire. You can't control the fire. You can't control the pot. I think you have to have a, you know, good-sized pot to cook a nice meal. And I think, and everyone's pot is different. You seem to have a large pot. You seem to have a good appetite, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, why settle for anything less than inclusivity, right? I mean, if I'm sort of curious enough to sort of be able to imagine that as if there's 7 billion people on the planet, then why shouldn't I tell everyone else sort of good news that, hey, you know, there's 1 billion people already having Google Plus accounts, right? So why not saying hi to them? But I mean, then I'm very Swedish and very modest, right? So I'm happy if I kind of reach 300,000 people. But
and then how do you engage with 7 billion people?
Yeah, I mean, that's also a really great question. And I mean, I should almost put that as the top center in the next post, right? And attribute it to you, because I really mean it's a good question, and maybe we need a couple of thousand people to even begin to answer it. I mean, because I did some kind of a view count stuff, view count per follower, view count per post, stuff like that. I mean, in terms of actually measuring engagement, right? Because I'm Swedish in that respect as well, social engineering and all that. I like sort of figures, right? I've actually been a math teacher as well. So numbers and math is great stuff, right? And everyone should sort of think the same. And to my great sorrow, no, not many people think like that, right? So, but in terms of engagement, I can probably just engage with 1, 2, or 3 people at the same time. That's kind of my personal individual limit. So it's, I mean, I could think whatever I want about that sort of crazy limit for my poor individual brain, right? But that's it, right? But when starting the conversation community, I discovered that if I let the conversation community mostly run through self-organizing principles, I can sort of dip in back and forth and have conversations with many more people. And it's a bit of a cheat, really, because I can still only have meaningful conversations, 1, 2, or 3 people tops at the same time. But the asynchronous nature of these digital spaces allow us to imagine and pretend as if we can have it with many more.
We are trying to build the molecules at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, the scaling thing is kind of what I'm kind of currently most passionate about finding out, and that is something that I would actually quite soon want to possibly also even hire you guys to help me find out, because with scaling, suddenly
how are you going to pay us here, by the way?
Yeah, I mean, with scaling, let me phrase it this way to sort of keep it in more or less inside the conversation community dynamic synopsis boundaries, right? The synopsis has an important business outcome of it. So it's not just a document to show off that we are kind of a crazy bunch and we've sort of talked about lots of stuff. There's a deliverable. And what's a deliverable? Well, it's time, or actually saving time. Because my clients, they basically said to me, John, what you're doing is lovely, it's great stuff, it's dialogue and all kinds of nice things, but we're not interested. Sorry, we're just not interested because we haven't got the time. Okay, fine, got it. What about collaboration? No, sorry, we are not interested. And I went through all this, and they basically just sort of cut me short and said no, 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 no. And those are great clients to have, basically saying no to almost anything you say to them, right? Those are really great clients. You should keep those. Those who just say yes to everything you say, you should fire those clients immediately. But then I got to the point where I saw that they didn't say yes, because these are kind of hard-boiled clients I have, right? But they didn't say no either, and their ears perked up. And here's the thing. I told them that what if I figure out a sequence getting from point A, just a bunch of people thrown together who started as perfect strangers, and then 900 people later, we will begin to ship product. Yeah, that sequence from A to B, we are really, really interested in. I squeezed their arm to actually say that, because I noticed from the body language that they were interested. I didn't sort of take the lack of answer for an answer, so I squeezed their arm until they actually told me what it was that they were interested in. So here's a solid deliverable out of the synopsis, or rather when we build further on it, and when we annotate with our expertise knowledge and add our own services, products, artifacts, whatnot, to elaborate around, so to provide rich, meaningful context for clients.
For Ericsson, sorry, John.
Yeah, go on.
I used to work for Ericsson, and they have they are Swedes, as you know.
Yeah.
They start with a requirement specification. They bring the client in the designers, the project managers, and they write down a requirement specification on the client's needs.
Yeah.
I think we need to find out what the needs are.
Yeah, I mean the needs is
Who are the clients anyway?
well, when I was asked, also one of those great private messages I got kind of a couple of months ago, John, what is your main focus when you interact with the people in conversation community? Then I said, well, that question is actually fairly easy to answer. I treat everyone as if they were clients. Everyone, right? Every single 895 of you, I treat as if you were clients. And for me, this is an important distinction, right? Because whether you pay me or not is not the core of it, right? It's how this helps me provide an as objective and as discerning and as mindful and respectful and as attentive focus as I can possibly have, right? And also it makes for great building of rapport and trust, because if everyone sees that that's how John goes about it, right? And then also it makes practical sense, right? Because if and when, actually more of a case of when now, I'm going to sort of begin to monetize the conversation community, then this will not sort of be a flagrant faux pas. It will not sort of be an overstepping of and making a huge disappointment, because I treated everyone as if they were clients already. Now I've just sort of needed to figure out together with others how you could actually monetize this in a way that doesn't sort of scare away everyone.
But also we are interested here to build some collective action, aren't we?
Yeah.
Then
yeah.
we have to have some collective clients, like larger clients. If we are the designers, then we need some, we have to work towards meeting some needs of customers, whoever they are, outside customers. And
here's a simplification.
We are trying to aim to be designers of some clients, aren't we?
Well, in an ideal world, you could actually sort of find the client where you last put them, right? But in the more network-centric age, they sort of tend to move about and change their minds and sort of be slightly on almost the promiscuous side in terms of, because the options are sort of proliferated, right? There's now 100 providers of pretty much anything. So the grab bag thing for this to build sort of attraction, to build pull, so having the clients come to us and tell us what they need instead of just making sort of vain efforts to go chase clients. I mean, no one wants that, right? We should use networks to have building our stories so the clients comes to us and tell us with precision what they want, and here's a check, and here's what I want you to do, and thank you, right? So the grab bag for this, I mean, I'm skipping over lots of steps here, is building something that I call community as a service. So this is basically building on the trust flow, the part of the trust flow that can make for lower transaction costs inside the conversation community, in this case a prototype, in a way that makes for better co-creation of value, the part that sort of faces the client. There's lots of different ways that could be turned into then more bespoke models. It can be turned into artifacts, it can be turned into services, products. I mean, let's say there's 900 people in the conversation community. Let's say there's around about 50-60 people who are already beginning to sort of put one and one together and turning it into 3, right? So there's 8 or 9 prototype community products already underway in various stages of prototyping. All of them could be turned into full-fledged products and be monetized and making us tons of money. But I want to sort of keep true to the self-organizing nature of the conversation community. And this goes all the way back to my clients that says, John, if you ever get the A to B done right, tell us, because that we will buy from you and we will pay you handsomely for that little nugget of wisdom, right? How did you get from A to B? So this is kind of what I'm also trying to give back to the community, because it's not such a big secret really. So I've teased out patterns of interaction, patterns making for good conversations, patterns making for evolution of conversations, patterns to augment trust flow, patterns for this and for that, right? And when I'm sort of feeling back into the community, into the actual conversations, then I'm field testing them. So I see, do they work? Yeah, let's keep those patterns. And some other patterns are I'm kind of working with in my kind of workbench, and I can think that they're great. They just don't work. So, okay, let's tweak and anneal them and build on them some more. I mean, I did an experiment, I think it was in September, October last year, where I infested all the 4 comment threads with lots and lots of hashtags, and people started to hate me for it. And then I thought, well, I need to do a little less of that then, right? So I'm field testing all these things all the time, right? So I can sort of figure out, kind of basically a very simple answer, kind of what is the conversations as practiced in the conversation community, and what parts of that makes for co-creation of value, and what parts of the co-creation of value can be packaged and sold to clients. Now, this also helps that, I mean, there's a methodology underlying this. I can tell you a bit about that if that helps put context on. My day job is basically I'm whacking executives on the side of the head until they stop putting knives in the backs of each other, and then they start conversing again with each other as if they are people. This makes for better team learning, better team effectiveness, better true authentic compliance, better trust inside the executive teams, and as a result they pay me offensive amounts of money because suddenly they can sort of work together again, right, without fearing for their lives. So this is kind of what I've been doing since 1998. So this is also how the patterns came to be. I jotted down what they did that seemed to work. So I jotted down what happened as a pattern immediately before coming unstuck, immediately before switching from communication to conversation, having a change of heart, rediscovering, wow, the other teammates are actual human beings, and so am I, and so on, right? So I have now run 500 of these patterns. Now, the trouble with those is that when they saw that it worked, they asked me, John, great stuff, do you know why it works? And then I had to confess, no, I haven't got a clue, because I've just sort of jotted down stuff. So that basically sent me off on a kind of further quest to study narratives, sense-making, patterns, design thinking. I mean, I won't go on, right? I anchored it all the way down to biosemiotics, because here again I wanted to find out, is this just something I have sort of imagined, or is this something that sort of can be tested in an objective way, right? So there's, I mean, there's actually kind of a solid growing body of dialogues in between me and Manis and Victor in terms of Hangout On Air, recorded conversations between me and him, where we explored biomimicry, neuroscience, enaction, loads of stuff, right? So there's at least 10 or 15 videos already where we basically outline this as much as we possibly can. So if you want to sort of go wild about sort of delving deep into the whole pattern world, then there's videos galore. But back to kind of the synopsis thing, because sort of I said a bit about kind of there's an ethos of sorts related to the co-creation of value. So I believe very strongly in win-win-win. So when I do a transaction with someone else, if I'm doing I mean, I should have a win, right? I should be seen as clever or providing good value or starting a conversation community and everyone is happy with that and la la la, right? But there should also be a win for you guys, that if you participate in the conversation community, there should be some way for you to measure that it should be meaningful, valuable for you to engage inside the conversation community rather than outside, right? Otherwise, why care joining? Why care remaining, right? It would simply
Maybe
make
a question of how important is monetization comes here, you know, in terms of interests, keeping interests going. What kind of people do you want to attract?
Yeah, I mean, that's also a good question, right? Because that is, I basically don't know, right? Because building on Craig's very insightful thing, right? That we really don't know what makes for a good conversation. I mean, we sort of know what makes for a good conversation, right? But there's 7,000 living languages on the planet. There's hundreds and hundreds of different cultures. There's 8 personality types. There's many, many different levels of awareness, of self-reflection, of how we interpret things. And I mean, it's complex, right? To sum
For
that
me,
up.
you know, if I talk for myself, I don't need money that much. I've got a bit of money. What I am more interested in is a good conversation and interesting friends around the world.
Yeah. Well, why not have both, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of my. I'm not sure how many million times I've said this when people say you have to do this or that. My almost immediate automatic response is, what's the third option?
And
Yeah. So, and I mean, to give you context for that, right? I grew up in this seemingly more or less strange family, right? I mean, we were nice and so, and I had 2 older sisters, and compared with my sisters, I'm still the silent one, right? And
really,
you then just have to imagine my sisters, right?
okay.
So if I survive that, there's no one else on the planet can ever get me to shut up, right? So I mean, my particular flavor of conversation, I do know that is almost no one else's flavor of conversation, right? Because then, having sort of survived the ordeal and dialogue and David Bohm and God knows what else, because I kind of figured out that there's probably ways of sort of having family life that is very different from the one I had, right? And there was but in a way, you can't sort of fully escape. I mean, to give you context on that, I'm kind of a wordsmith, right? It's what I am, right? I can sort of try to escape that and try to make up some fancy name, but that's who I am, right? I craft tons and tons of content, right? Putting headers on top of content text and then putting a nice image in, and everyone goes gaga because it's wonderful, right? And for me, it's kind of like nothing. I can just burp these out like nothing, right? And my dad was a silversmith, right?
Oh.
So that's a huge leap from silversmith to wordsmith, right?
How about your mom?
My granddad was a blacksmith, so he could sort of tink and do anything in the village.
So there's refinement,
so in a way,
generation after generation. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my granddad almost didn't speak at all, right? At the kitchen table, he was sort of grunting, and everyone sort of wanted to sort of quickly do his bidding, otherwise there would be wrath, right? And my dad almost learned how to speak, but he spoke very, very infrequently, because the John Kelly you are noticing right now, it's from my mother's side, right? So my mother was an interior designer, and the designer. And she knew everyone in, I mean, this is Stockholm, Sweden we're talking about, right? Right out in the middle of nowhere. But I mean, as Sweden goes, Stockholm is quite a big thing. It's a capital city and 1 million people. And she knew everyone there was worth knowing in Stockholm in her day. So when I grew up, there was these famous people right in the middle of our house, right? Film stars, directors, designers, all those sort of thought they were something. So I grew up with kind of thinking that wasn't such a big deal, right? And in a way, it isn't. And that has also served me really well in the conversation community. When someone joins and everyone else goes, wow, that guy has joined. Wow, this is a big deal. No, it's just a person, right? It's a he or a she or an it or something, and it's kind of someone like anyone else, right? But what I've also discovered through having met all these strange people is that, and I mean, I haven't sort of set out to do that, but there's loads and loads of very interesting, really strange, really weird people in the conversation community. And I mean, weird is possibly the highest praise you can ever get from me. So if I would ever say to you, you are really weird, that is an affectionate term coming from me, right? But I also need to understand that in order to get reach outside of this sort of little sanctuary conversation community, I can't sort of put on my full weirdometer, right? Because I will sort of weird people out. But in terms of the, again, returning to the synopsis, I mean, weird and edge and being able to endure other people's weirdnesses and edginesses makes for co-creation of value. I mean, already in between us, we could co-create really wonderful things, right? Without even breaking a sweat.
Right.
And then all those people who are, so instead of killing all those other people who are boring, right? Let's turn them into clients and figure out together in between us how to communicate with them, how to influence them, how to motivate them, how to do this or that to them, so they can see that it will actually make tons of sense to buy stuff from us. And here's, returning back from the part when I'm going to turn the conversation community synopsis into kind of more of a community as a service thing. In order to do that, there needs to be some development of a sort of a platform, something that everyone would recognize as, yeah, this is the definition of the platform. But once that is done, I aim to offer the conversation community as a bit of a launch pad. And this means that anything to do with co-creation value has always gotten and will always get preferential treatment. I mean, also returning to the core value, right? Win-win-win. If this
What do you mean by platform, John?
Sorry?
What do you mean by platform?
Well, platform is could mean many things, right? I mean, Google Plus in itself is sort of a platform, but
what would be a platform on top of Google Plus?
I can give you a concrete example. I mean, there's a book happening right now, Social Presence Field Book, and that will contain individual chapters written by individual authors, all members of the conversation community. And once that book is done, it's going to be turned into a printed book, it's going to turn into ebook, it's going to turn into an interactive website, into apps and stuff, and together they comprise a platform. So then you can sort of build your brand on top of the conversation community and enjoy better reach, better resonance, having all these other chapter writers, authors to support you in whatever quest, branding, hunting clients or whatnot you want, right? So let me kind of just give you kind of a short description of what social presence, how I define it. Social presence is the part of our own unique individual story that carries in a network. So this is kind of also by this very definition how it could serve as a platform and as a launch pad, right? So the platform, because everyone would eventually recognize that this is probably a good thing, right? To figure out how to curate a select part of your own story that actually other people care about. It's basically kind of branding, but a bit more to it. Branding multiplied with authenticity, if you will. But then, as a launch pad, you can then sort of build on your own individual chapter. So anytime you're sort of out evangelizing for your own stuff, you have us sort of, we've got your back, so to speak, right? And the difficulty here is just basically a mindset one, right? We have sort of been carefully groomed, at least in the Western civilization, to basically just do the John Wayne thing, right? To go it alone, right? I mean, kill the foes, and those who are left standing is me and my clients, right? Everyone else I just killed. And if we have to, then social presence really will not make that much sense. But if we realize that we can actually help each other and still remain competitive in terms of our own expertise domain, then the social presence, and also even more so the social presence field book, will make tons of sense, because the field book will allow us to field test it, right? But first in the conversation community, and then by extension elsewhere. I mean,
Yeah,
social presence field book. I mean,
we need to be able to give without expecting anything from the other side to build trust, I think.
well, that's also a great question and concern. I mean, obviously, I mean, I've been called so many things now, so it's kind of a bit fantastic, really. I've been called fearless leader. I've been called dangerous psychopath. I've been called all kinds of things in between, right? But I mean, that's kind of par for the course, right? When you start one of these things and you sort of don't go the designated path, right? This is not the typical Android community. We don't have kind of a thingy in the middle. We have conversations as a process in the middle, which is already strange, right? And then the caliber of people inside already, I mean, you among them, I mean, the collective brain power is immense, right? But I mean, just that. But then we have kind of beating hearts as well, right? And that's also why we do these sort of projections, right? Because I realized from my years and years of experience in brainstorms in the online community that I had to do the enlightened dictator thing. There's only one moderator, me. There's only one fearless leader, me, right? So the buck stops here. So there's no sort of death by committee ever happening in the conversation community, because this is just me. But eventually, when this has sort of scaled to around 3 or 4 or 5,000 people, there will be sufficient funds, money is coming in, so I can sort of begin to employ people, whoever wants to sort of deal with scaling, funding, crowdfunding, whatnot, right? And by then, it's still mostly on me to have people understand that this is not bad for the community. On the contrary, right? This is us figuring out better options than just doing content marketing. So let's say we fake all our conversations. We just sort of pretend, right? We just pretend that we're nice, pretend that we care, pretend that we give a damn about other people. That's a perfect starting point for doing only content marketing. Now, content is kind of what we have to use as a vessel, right? I mean, you could actually see this Hangout on air once it's recorded, becomes just another piece of content. And all my 9,000 Google Plus posts, just a whole bunch of content. But if we add a different intention, so if we pretend, we go beyond just pretending to care and actually care. I mean, this is difficult, right? It's scary stuff because it requires authenticity, it requires vulnerability, it requires extending trust, loads of things that we really don't know how to do yet on these platforms. And thus, the need for this kind of scaffold concept, this social presence thing, because we need to help figure it out. How do we do that, right?
You know, I've got a
Why does this have to be so difficult in terms of the translating this to the platform?
Well, that's also a good question. It doesn't have to be difficult in theory, but in practice it is. I mean, to give you, I started with social presence, introducing the concept this summer in June, I think. And now March, April this year, the chapters are coming in. So I mean, this is also obviously part my doing, right? I didn't want to squeeze anyone's arm. I didn't want to send out loads and loads of messages saying, give me the chapter or else, right? Because then I would have turned into a fearless leader, and then all my kind of nice talk about self-organizing would have been moot, right? It would have just been hogwash, right? Then I would have been fake, right? So I had to wait until the collective intelligence, whatever that is, we really don't know yet, right?
Example from the Turkish women, how Turkish women organize these things, or the foundation sort of thing amongst Turkish women. For example, they come together for tea and cake.
Yeah.
It's meaningless. It's rubbish. I used to look at it like that anyway. Just gossip. Pointless gossip. They just start warming up. One says something, another says something else. It's pop stuff, you know. But on top of that, you get interesting little news, useful news, you know. I think the success of this kind of thing, the cake and tea type of thing, is that cake and tea is not the purpose. The purpose is the gossip.
Yeah.
And the purpose of the gossip is information.
Yeah. I mean, this is kind of I've said, and I can sort of say it again and again for as many thousand times as needed, that the only mandatory thing in the conversation committee is to add considerate comments on other people's posts. If we do that, this will turn into smashing success. Guaranteed, right? But we also need to fully understand ourselves and be forgiving towards ourselves and others, because if we are honest with ourselves, we just primarily are interested in ourselves, right? I mean, me worse than anyone else of you, because I've done 9,000 Google Plus posts, right? I mean, can you imagine someone even more conceited than that, right? I have to love the sound of my own voice and my own content to actually being able to do that, right? But here's when I discovered that people actually reciprocated and helped me improve my stuff, figuring out what works, how to start a community, how to run it, how to maintain it, how to grow it. There is a way to sort of we between me and we in a very sort of solid, robust, resilient way. And it is actually very close to the tea and cake thing. So the closest equivalent to tea and cake is to start having conversations about basically anything.
Yes, yes.
And then little by little, sort of indirectly, by just commenting on other people's posts. And this is important, possibly, to begin with it as if we care, right? And I don't mean that we should fake it, it's not that. But as if we care mean we actually don't know the other person yet, right? We don't trust them because we can't trust them because we don't know who they are, right? I mean, I could turn out to be a serial killer, right? I mean, and then you would sort of been feeling very strange if that word ever got out, right? But here's actually where also algorithms can come to the rescue. So the algorithms inside Google Plus have already figured out, because I've sort of fed it with 9,000 posts. So there's rich, deep context on me and on everyone else. And I discovered this very early on. The only way I could ever hope to play well with this platform, this Google Plus thing, with the algorithms, was to be myself. And kind of warts and all, that's exactly what I did, right? Because it's way too difficult. I mean, I can fool other people, but I can't fool all the people all the time. And I can definitely not fool algorithms. So this is where I said that the part of I want to get to 300,000 people. Because now you know, right? That's kind of my game plan, and now you know why I'm doing what I'm doing, because there's context, dynamic context. If someone else wants to do 300 people, that's equally great. It's just it should be very different strategies. But what can still be done is, I mean, this is basically my very short speech about kind of diversity, right? Different cultures, different reach, different resonance, different reciprocity. Some are extroverts, some are introverts, and that. But in these digital communities, through these basically just tea and biscuits, tea and cake, we can exchange an insight or two, right? Share a story or two. And if others like it, they will reshare it. To begin with, only for their own sake, right? I mean, I have some posts, and I know a couple of people. They basically never talk with me, but they'd like to reshare my stuff. And that's a bit annoying to begin with, obviously, because, I mean, it's like having someone just sort of nicking your clothes, right? But after a while, it sort of grows on you that this is actually kind of a good thing, right? They actually sort of signal to the rest of the world that this is good stuff, right? We want to share this with others. So some of our organizing metaphors, some of our ideas about ourselves and the world, we can use, but some of them we need to sort of modify, and some of them we have to sort of give up almost altogether. So my kind of being annoyed with other people resharing my stuff, I just have to let go of that notion, right? Because that doesn't sort of jive with the network.
Have you seen other people like yourself, John, on Google Plus?
Yeah, I mean, there was a woman who basically commented on every post I had last year. And she said basically, "Thank you, dear John Keldon." But that was everything she ever said. But she commented on every post, right? So this was a kind of a fake conversation, right? So eventually, because I tried to reason with her privately, I say, for the love of God, can you please say anything else than just "Thank you, dear John Keldon"? I never got a reply, right? So I had to block her eventually. And I mean, because you could say that the first comment almost kind of like sets the tone. And if someone then just sort of bombards anyone else's sort of post with kind of those kind of fake ersatz contrived comments, it kind of ruins the whole broth for the others.
Perhaps she was flirting with you, John.
Well, no. I mean,
No.
she had 100,000 followers, and she did exactly the same thing with everyone else, right? She was just playing the numbers. And obviously, if that is your strategy, and that will serve you to sort of get your story out, that's not sort of bad in itself. It's just that you shouldn't come anywhere near me doing that.
Yes.
I mean, this is kind of, I can't build my brand and say, I want to have authentic conversations. And then you see me engaging in fake, pretend, contrived conversations with loads of people, right? That wouldn't be a good thing. And for me, actually, I still believe that that's actually not a good thing, even objectively. You shouldn't treat people as if objects. You shouldn't play the numbers. I mean, but you can play the numbers by resonance, reciprocity, and reach, and then you can actually be getting your story out, getting sort of the numbers as well, but indirectly through being a great storyteller, by being by reciprocating meaningfully, basically commenting and saying hi and thank you, but I mean, this is difficult, right? I mean, sometimes I'm in a bit of a press for time, so I can only do kind of thank you for resharing my post. And I know that's terribly lame, but that's kind of all the time I've got to sort of say something to someone else was kind of nice enough to reshare stuff, right? But whenever I have the time, I actually read someone resharing it and putting an intro in. I'm reading the intro, and if I find an intro great, I say, "Brilliant intro. I particularly like this and this and that," right? So then someone gets kind of a human reciprocation from me, from having gotten to the trouble of actually sort of resharing my stuff. And that builds meaningful connectivity already there, right? I mean, I could go on and on. There's thousands of these kind of small interaction patterns that sort of collected over the time, right? And loads of this has also been putting into the conversation community, so people shouldn't sort of have to do all the mistakes I already did. But this is kind of also one of those human things that we need to sort of do lots and lots of mistakes for ourselves, right? It doesn't matter if other people tell us that you shouldn't do it like that. We need to hit our own brick walls now and then. So that's just how it is. But I mean, in terms of synopsis, again, yeah, I should say that. There's ongoingly an anchoring of sorts, a simplification of sorts, of the sort of the pinned post, the conversation community dynamic synopsis. So eventually, more and more people will be able to figure out what is actually going on in the conversation community. I mean, right now, there's some people who are annoyed with me because I'm going on and on and on about the community products. I mean, this is kind of all kinds of messages I get, kind of, have John joined the dark side? Has he gone sort of completely commercial on us? Or so and so, right? And any kind of which kind of reaction. But the community products grew out of the co-creation of value inside, in between the conversation members.
Yeah,
So for
that's
me,
what I see about you. When
yeah,
I look at you, I don't see really monetization that much. I see co-creation of value. That's
yeah,
why I sort of kept being around you.
yeah. I mean, this is kind of where, and again, this is not me trying to sort of be better than anyone else, right? I'm kind of a half bad, half good bastard, same as anyone else, right? But when I figured out that, hey, there's algorithms in here, and they're actually keeping track on volume, velocity, variety, and veracity. You know, that last part, veracity. There's a bloody algorithm checking if we are authentic or not, right? So that bloody well better be, right? And this is, I mean, but that's not the only reason, obviously, right? I try to be as sort of decent as I possibly can. And also, if we can showcase that sort of by being decent, we can sort of outcompete the bastards.
Yes, yes.
We can make
We
tons
need
of
more
money
number
and
builders.
be kind of lead meaningful, good businesses, right? So, and I mean, this is a big topic. So I'm trying to sort of stick to this kind of the synopsis aspect of it. If people can realize eventually that self-organizing is better, an additional degree of freedom for ourselves, if you will. Self-organizing also eventually means that the community becomes its own curriculum. I mean, this hasn't really happened yet. It's kind of what I'm working towards. And when that happens, then there's a sufficiently shareable understanding for what goes on. People can join, make up their own minds if they want to stay there, and why they want to stay there, what they want to contribute, and how they want to contribute. So it becomes a virtuous cycle almost. And when that happens, we could basically also make tons of money, because then we can export this sort of know-how, these patterns, and how we did it, and how we are doing it to others. I mean, this is where I'm beginning to notice, I'm checking with other communities, right? Other Google Plus communities. So I'm seeing we are basically out competing them again and again and again in terms of tone, content, depth, value, number of comments per post, number of plus comments per post. So this is not just me being a fluff bunny, right? Being kind of Mr. Nice Guy. There's sort of hard, solid data to back some of this stuff up as well, right? And this is kind of what's, if you go to kind of any which kind of corporate internet, some of my clients do those things, right? And corporate internet is kind of like T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, right? It's the absolute pits, right? And you should never be in any of the typical corporate internets, because it's kind of condemning yourself to hell and tarnation, right? But
I've been there.
if we can export some of whatever it is we are doing, right? We're starting off as perfect strangers, and then we sort of develop conversations, and then it begets trust flow, meaningful connectivity, and we can do meaningful stuff together. That's the exact ticket what they want as well. And here, I mean, Christopher's with sort of the gamification towards intelligent behavior.
Right.
Ron finding the resonance. I mean, Ron has sort of said something that actually is such a wonderful quote. I need to repeat it, I think. I think if I not misquote you too badly, Ron, he said something like, "It was a wonderful thing discovering that you don't have any taste."
Yeah. I guess that quote's going to follow me now.
Yeah, I'm going to immortalize that. Sorry. And I mean, what I like the most about it is that if we create something, co-create value. I mean, in Ron's case, it's sort of he helps people sort of discover music and how to create and produce music. And in order to sort of be an effective music teacher, you can't just be too condescending towards someone who's doing death metal or something that is just an awful racket, right? Because that's their thing, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So my personal taste is kind of Beatles and Mozart, right? But I've trained myself also to like Einstürzen and Neubauten, which is a German outfit which is pretty different than both Beatles and Mozart, right? They're basically kind of making an awful racket and banging on stuff, right? And
is it a noise band?
it's a German band. They basically hit on things that makes noise. Then, if they've been metal things being hit on hard, and machines, and even weirder stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like kind of sort of a noise band, perhaps, or.
Yeah. And I mean, also to go back in my deep, dark medieval history, when I was a young kid and I played the violin, I also played short stints in electrical violin in a punk band in Sweden.
Wow.
Yes.
But that should be probably pardoned a year or two from now. So then I will be kind of safe again.
Expunged from your record?
Yeah. No, we had loads of fun, but most of it was kind of NSFW probably. But more fun than should probably be allowed. But I mean, music is loads of fun, right? And everyone should play a musical instrument, or at least listen to music as much as they could. But the point, if there is one, in terms of the taste thing, right? So if we can accommodate and cater to almost all taste, there's actually kind of a grand synthesis possible then. A kind of a unity in diversity.
You should be
right?
able to talk about anything.
Yeah, I mean,
I should be able to come here and talk about my addiction, for example.
Yeah, I mean, and God knows I've tried, right? But when I go on too much and too deep with biosemiotics, which I love to talk about, then I have to also understand that sort of people go a bit blank on me, right? And I mean, I will to my dying day is kind of be staunch about that. It is really a lovely topic, and everyone should. I mean, if I would be omniscient and all powerful, I would probably have it as a mandatory subject in all schools, right? I mean, I give you one short example, so that's just crazy. People talk about memetics a lot, right? Cats and bacon and speaking Doge and all the weird fun stuff, right? And that's just scratching the surface of this whole biosemiotics field. So biosemiotics is basically keeping in mind that we are embodied science. So we are transceiving science, we are emitting science, we are receiving science back and forth. And that's what kind of makes us resonant beings, this sort of sign co-production. I mean, to be in a social network and not being in the least interested in biosemiotics is for me really weird, because it's kind of 90% of what we're doing. So when I'm talking about music, and if resonates with you others, then something I said was something I emitted was being received from you at your end of this kind of digital thing, right? And I mean, the whole Google Plus thing is a virtual aggregation of science, basically just ones and zeros that some clever coder, designer, programmer, systems guy has turned into something that we can sort of actually interact through, right? I mean, it's really mind-boggling to think about it.
John?
Yeah.
It is mind-boggling. And in this context, and even using the B word, biosemiotics,
the B word was the Beatles.
When you spoke earlier, and tying it to what you said earlier about you didn't know why the patterns work that you discovered in working with these companies, and that really resonated with me at that point. Speaking also of resonance, because it's really strangely parallel. I'm shocked again. I still occasionally get shocked by you and the things that are happening here, because I really had a very similar experience in a totally different context, though. But I wanted to I didn't understand the patterns that I was seeing either. In like interactive experiments with students and colleagues in learning and arts, and a completely different milieu, but I still had that same experience, and that's what brought me really to Google Plus, because I didn't understand what these patterns, why they were happening and working and producing changes in my brain and the brains of some of the students. And so in the general sense, I was trying to understand the patterns as well, just like you were. I know it's a almost completely different experience, but it really just rang my bell when you said that earlier today.
Yeah, I mean, actually, we can tie in Project Mixtape here because it might help provide a context that can sort of be relatable. Let's see. I mentioned, I think, agency, inclusivity, and curiosity, right? So let's say we imagine now we're using the Project Mixtape app. Imagine that there's an app now, so we can sort of twiddle it and add an amp or de-amp stuff, right? So if I go too high on inclusivity, I will come across as too nice. I will sort of heap lavish praise on your every word because I want you to be part of the experience, joining the bus, right, and drinking the Kool-Aid already. And you will begin to feel that, wow, he's beginning to be a bit creepy. So let's tune down the inclusivity notch, will you? Thank you. So now you're actually already using the Project Mixtape app, right? Although it's just in our heads. If I amp up agency too much, I mean, if you have your ears more or less intact, you know that I'm amping up agency pretty hard at times, right? Because I'm just talking and talking and talking, and then I'm talking some more. So you already have sort of fresh experience from me amping that up, right? And I mean, I'm really grateful for you edging words in now and then cutting me off because I really like that. I mean, that's kind of that's how we do conversations in my family, right? We just sort of grab the first fraction of a second and we go with it, right?
It was a strong feeling, and I just it had been kind of bubbling along, and then it had to come out at that point.
Yeah, and I mean, also, if I would amp up curiosity much, that would feel kind of a bit weird too, because then I would sort of probe you deep down into your soul and spirit and ask about kind of how resonant your heart chakra is, and then you'd be really weird, right? Because then I'm too curious, right? I'm probing too deep, too soon, right, and too much. But if we sort of, this is kind of what a music producer knows really well how to do, and it will probably remain an art, even if we develop this app. Maybe we can sort of agree on some amount of inclusivity, some amount of curiosity, some amount of agency. But the last finishing touches probably will ever have to remain art, because my guess for now is algorithms and heuristics will probably take care of 80% of the heavy lifting. But the remaining 10, 15, 20% will probably have to be us. And this is extremely important because we are kind of inside a big set of algorithms already. I mean, Google are at this moment, through video, through text, through posts, comments, they are mining our every word and aggregating it and spitting some of it back into view count, spitting some other stuff back into suggested hashtags for our every post, and so on and so forth. We're kind of inside, we sort of got swallowed and eaten by the machine already. So welcome to the matrix, right? But the saving grace here, I mean, if we realize that maybe Google isn't, they are not just all evil, right? They have sort of put this in place because they just want to do business. And what's their business? Well, they want to sort of use our aggregated words, data, content, and aggregate it in a way that sort of puts premium value on their AdWords products, among other things. Right? And if they can use us to do that, well, great, right? They're making billions, and we're making nothing. And that's the kind of part of the equation that we should stop ourselves, right? That's a bit unfair that they're making billions and we are making zilch. Right?
But we need to have the gold from the golden nuggets.
Yeah, I mean, if we realize that they need us more than we need them,
right,
we can build an additional social meta layer on top of their algorithmic social meta layer.
Right.
That needs to be built. It needs to be built through heuristics, through agency, inclusivity, curiosity, and possibly a couple of hundred other parameters, criteria. I mean, again, kind of inclusivity, right? If I would say with precision that this is the John Kelden set of algorithms that you are now kind of need to follow, well, obviously I could be very persuasive, but I'm not kidding myself. I could be that persuasive. You should sort of buy it wholesale package, right, and sign a dotted line.
From the fearless leader, yeah.
No, I mean it will backfire. Right? I've actually tried it a couple of times and it doesn't work. So not for lack of trying. I mean, now and then you meet a client that needs some bit of an arm squeezing, and you can sort of get a good value out of it. You will, right? I mean, I will. But mostly I kind of prefer to do soft sales, right? Having the client decide, making their own minds up, and then they come to me and they say, John, can you do this or that? And then I think for a while, and they say, yeah, I can probably do one of this or that, yeah. And then we agree on doing something. And what's the point here? Well, yeah, there's billions of dollars in value co-created by us. And the next generation of digital platforms, we might be able to pull off something called distributed platforms. And then we have a chance to be in a better ownership position relative to our own data. So this makes for such a proliferation of new business models. So let's make a concrete example here. Let's say there's a big brand. And let's say there's a network of people out of the conversation community 2 years from now. Let's say there's 50 of us. We're sort of doing stuff, right? And then they could buy our data and buy our attention, buy our kind of collective intention. And we can very quickly send something back, reciprocate in a way that is enormously valuable to them. And we get a fair share of the winnings. But this requires us having both individual and collective ownership of the data required. That is kind of the bedrock of the actual transactions and the co-creation in between us.
Can something be done through this conversation thing? Like, you know, on TV there are some, there have been some shows, you know, the sitcoms.
Well,
they just sit and talk about funny stuff or any stuff, and you know, millions of people watch them.
yeah.
Can't we just add some entertainment to this thing and make a channel out of it?
Well, actually, I think what we could do, even inside Google+, even inside the conversation community already, is to basically start something that is boringly sounding as webinars, expert panels.
What's that?
Yeah, and if we would then think things through, and this is kind of actually one of those sort of 8-9 prototype community products I've already sort of started to launch, which is already underway, right? And but if we sort of elaborate on that a bit more, we could just start it already, right? So it could be a kind of a long series of webinars, and it would be 2, 3, or 4, or 5 of us, kind of on a rotating schedule or on a kind of an ad hoc, self-organizing way. Loads of ways you could organize this in practice, right? And then we invite clients, or we do the Hangout webinars, package them, edit them, and put some context on, package them some more, and then there's clients that are who are paying us for doing this. I mean, what we are doing now in this Hangout is at the absolute edge of what, I mean, most of my clients wouldn't actually believe that this actually can be done, what we're doing right now.
We could invite some, you know, how about inviting some popular characters?
Well,
You know,
yeah.
I think I'm interested in this idea of having an entertaining side to it, but I think that and There we go. And I think the seminars do appeal to me, though. I mean, I know it's not a talk show or a reality show yet, but you never know what kind of spin-offs there might be to some things. And I'm also want to tie in the topic of gamification as well, because I think whether you talk about it as entertainment or not, but
well, it's really infotainment.
Both of these, gamification. Sorry, go ahead. Yes.
I was just going to say it's look upon it as infotainment, that you have the opportunity to distribute information and make education and learning even more engaging by creating the same sort of dynamic that you would find in any game, whether it was chess or checkers or video games.
Yeah,
I'm especially it's the dynamic I'm really especially interested in, and also as it kind of leads into story and narrative. I'm actually I'm more interested in that side of it because of my experiences have led me to it, not because of theoretical understanding originally. Although I eventually did learn about the B word, and but the gamification for me is, I mean, I'm also in the transmedia idea, and I don't know if there would be also reality shows involved that could be a spin-off or some wildly popular kind of aspect to it. I'm open to that, but I still think that I don't see anything wrong. I think it would be good starting with the seminar idea. Nonetheless,
I mean,
I
can just give you kind of a very simple what we could do already in between us, right? Let's say
what we can do.
Let's say Manis and Victor would provide the neuroscience aspect that are absolutely essential to be able to sort of play really well inside social networks. Ron would weigh in and give his expert experience on why is resonance important in networks. I could sort of add on and see what particular small nuggets of wisdom from biosemiotics is absolutely crucial to understand in order to, for instance, create relevant, relatable Google Plus posts, and so on and so forth. And Christopher, you could sort of then add how can a client learn to apply some of your stuff and then sort of take it further, for instance, into an intranet, right? So I mean, it would sort of require 2-3 more steps of sort of tweaking, packaging, repackaging, field testing, and so on. But once we would have done that, this sort of the thing that my clients have already identified is that, John, you have seemed to doing something that seemed to attract people, and they seem to stay in more or less one place, and they seem to have engaged in meaningful conversations, interactions. And this is, I mean, this is kind of how Howard Rheingold started in '98, right? Because everyone told him that it couldn't be done. So he just went ahead and did it in brainstorms in the virtual community. So he proved that it could be done. Now, so I'm not actually doing anything more than just sort of further improving on kind of the loads of stuff that I already know for a fact can be done, right? But just that most people, in a digital sense, most people are still on kind of the email level. So there's so many things we could do on such a sort of very, very basic level.
Could we do something like the nerd equivalent of say Friends on TV, like a nerd sitcom, a sitcom that nerds like me, for example, can enjoy?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we have to sort of spin it too much, because
I don't know that you need a remake of it. That's already been done.
I'm not sure I even need a script for that. You can sort of just put me in front of a camera and then we kind of have the reality show already. But so I mean, don't sort of make it up if reality is even weirder than anything we could make up, right? But the solid value that could be had is this diversity, this looking at basically almost anything from such a great number of different perspectives, and it would still kind of make some kind of a coherent sense, right? And in terms of making solid business sense, we should probably need to sort of do some kind of a scripting, because, or at least some editing after.
Yes.
Because a typical business person needs to sort of consume these in kind of 5, 10, 15-minute segments.
Absolutely.
But once we would do that, and then this is again where Ron comes in very handy, because he knows how to sort of produce stuff, sort of distill it down into the 3-minute pop song, if you will. And once you've done that, that is also a very kind of valuable thing for the clients, because again, what I said, kind of what the synopsis is all about, is sort of me trying to sort of engage the conversation community in terms of getting the gist out. I can tell you with precision what I mean by gist. I already told you that I wrote 9,000 Google Plus posts. I mean, that was basically just me kind of doing action learning, right? Field testing, putting stuff out and see what happens. But I've distilled it down into 5 words. So 9,000 posts, and now there's 5 words only. So those are data, meta tags, conversations, collective intelligence, stewardship. So from now on, you don't need to read any other more word from me ever, because you can just memorize those 5 words, right? And all the other things are kind of annotations and footnotes. And this is kind of me just showcasing that if we can convey sort of the core gists of the collective intelligence that we gather, for instance, in a panel. So we get, let's say there's a 3-minute segment and there's 4 of us. That gives us kind of some initial hellos and some closing and some stuff in between, and we have 30-40 second segments each when we say something really, really clever, smart, wise, thought-provoking, and pithy and funny.
In this, or is it just scripted, are you thinking?
Well,
it could be scripted, or it could be edited for certain purposes, but it could also be free-flowing like it is today.
Yeah, I think editing it down is a great way of doing it, because you have a natural conversation, and then you just take out those little golden nuggets.
Yeah.
And I mean, also editing can be done in a number of different ways, right? There's this kind of nice little transcript function that Google provides with all these Hangout On Air things. So you could have a client. I mean, the whole raw, unedited, kind of pure joy of us talking for hours and hours could be free. But then the client could subscribe on the perfectly relevant kind of transcript points, the timestamps, where they can sort of see that this, and this little couple of seconds here, those are the good ones, right? And again, this is a solid business value proposition, because it saves time, right?
There are, in fact, people who are beginning to create businesses based upon timestamping Google Hangouts.
Yeah.
As a valuable service.
Yeah. Because then we get both worlds, right? Because there's a certain vibe, ambience, quality, authenticity, if you will, if we just sort of keep on rambling, right? It's straight out of our hearts. I mean, I'm not sure if I even had to tell you, but obviously I have some kind of a theme I try valiantly and struggling to come back to now and then, with synopsis and this and that, right? But mostly just me winging it, right? And that is a good thing, right? Because some part of you resonates with, well, then if he's doing it, then I'm kind of free to just sort of chime in whenever I feel like it as well, right? And this is a essential value. I mean, these corporate intranets, or these boring corporate monodrones in terms of PowerPoint or whatnot in all these events that are happening across the planet, we could outcompete the hell out of all that, right? By being ourselves, and by extension then giving latitude and kind of the opportunity for others to also be like that, right? It would be more fun, more engaging, more valuable for everyone else, right? And this is not just us by default being better persons than anyone else. It's just that we are kind of a bit ahead of the curve here. We are doing this as we speak. And there's a couple of hundred things to sort of sort out before we could actually sort of begin to sell it. But I mean, I'm strange enough that I believe that those are the fun parts of conversations as well, to sort of sort out the business details. And again, a large chunks of this could sort of be field tested inside, for instance, the conversation community before we would sort of go mainstream or go public, right? I mean, so this. I mean, for me to sum up this. I mean, you can obviously stay, but let's see if we can sort of close this down in a couple of minutes. This has been a great conversation. I mean, I just started out with the kind of conversation community dynamic synopsis, but I was kind of holding the intention, holding the space for kind of at least giving a glimpse to what's the point with this synopsis, right? What's the point with the conversation community? What's the point of inviting you here? And I know that there's a number of people that bristle a bit, kind of rubbing them the wrong way when I speak about sort of strategic outcomes and deliverables and things like that, and clients, right? It's kind of, but for me, there's no kind of either or, right? If we engage in kind of solid, authentic conversations and there's business value to be had, well, the more the merrier, right? There's no contradiction. But I do know there are people that kind of, let's just stay with the learned metalogs and have the deep dialogues and talking about world problems. But I'm not like that, right? Sorry, I'm simply not.
I didn't even realize that you said you were getting some blowback about that. I didn't even realize that. It just seems perfectly natural for me. I'm sorry to say. I don't know why.
Well,
my problem.
Yeah, well, there's 4 guidelines. Add value to the community, add value to others, contribute at least once a month, and add what holds value to you, right? Those are the only guidelines in the conversation community. The principles are basically just rediscover conversations, rekindle conversations, revitalize conversations. So that's kind of the sum total of the explicit, the written down, the tablet of Moses. But then there's a couple of hundred of unwritten rules. So still people believe that as if they are real. But they basically just exist inside our heads and our hearts, right? And I mean, obviously, a very important unwritten rule. I mean, if you're offensive against me, I mean, I had one guy in November, December basically tell me to shut up. But as you've already figured out, that's impossible, right? So you shouldn't sort of bother telling me that. And I pretty much don't mind, right? Because it sort of comes with the territory. If I'm the fearless leader, I need to sort of take some of that sort of heat, right? Because it projections, right? But if someone is offensive against someone else in the conversation community, they're gone. So that's the benefit of being me, being the enlightened dictator, right? I can do these things, right? And I'm doing that because everyone else should sort of have the opportunity to feel pretty much sort of safe within the conversation community. There shouldn't sort of be any of these kind of things. Or if someone is sort of behaving badly, there will be consequences. Now, what's the point to this? The blowback. Yeah. This is kind of to be expected because with these unwritten rules, and then suddenly I'm renaming topics, I'm introducing community products, so I'm kind of upsetting things. I'm kind of stirring the pot, right? And it's actually a good thing that then I have blowback, right? Because that's kind of a deep, authentic sign that people actually give a damn. I would be much less worried if people would just sort of not complain at all, right? Because then we were just sort of doing a pretense thing, right? So this sounds strange, right? But that guy telling me to shut up in last November, that was a good post and a good, honest feedback, right? It's just that I still haven't figured out how to tell people that good job, good done, right? Finally, someone telling me straight from the heart what it is, right? Because we haven't really figured out the netiquette, the social presence, how to sort of engage with each other online. People already from all across the planet having different expectations and so on. And I mean, if anything, I'm making loads of mistakes every day. And we all do, right? It's just that I'm making so many posts every day, so I have redeeming qualities that probably outweigh the mistakes. But returning to the blowback, there's an important thing. If we launch anything, a series of webinars, one of the community products or whatnot, right? Then others that are mostly not contributing but are still members, or others outside the conversation community even, they will see that, wow, these guys aren't just talking, they are doing stuff. And on symbolic level, this is really, really important. This is really relevant, right? Because then other people will join. Maybe I could sort of join and do some stuff as well. And this is how we can actually scale it, right? Because then the community sort of takes another step in its evolution. And mind you, if you would just go by me, I started this conversation community with the express intention of just scaling it up to 150 people, because I just wanted to have really clever mates to have a chat with, right? And then it kind of grew. So now there's 900 people. So to be honest, I really don't know the further kind of continuation, right? It's anyone's guess, really. Because I could, the only way I could sort of influence this is basically throw everyone out and closing down the community. But sort of other, I mean, I won't do that. And other than that, it's kind of what it, this is also one of those very, very important things in terms of self-organizing. This is something that Howard Rheingold coined in the Brainstorms community many years ago. He's basically said this: what it is up to us. Such a seeming simple combination of words, right? But it holds kind of a profound insight in sort of the collective accountability, the collective responsibility. And it's actually a liberating insight, because then we can just sort of continue doing whatever it is that we really want to do. And again, the only mandatory thing in the conversation community is, if you find a post written by someone else and it's something of that resonates with you, you add a considerate comment. And it sounds too simple to work, right? And it could well be that that's why it works. So there's some magic happening there when a stranger out from the blue says something nice to you. It's really something really special. So it's like, in terms of music, I mean, I can sort of go way back when we struggled with a song, right? One of those sort of punk rock songs that was just a really bad song. But I mean, we thought it was great stuff, right, back then. And we struggled with it because we didn't have the bridge, right? We didn't have the sort of connective tissue in between the verse and the refrain. And then one of the guys in the group that basically never did help writing songs, he just said, could we do it like this? And then he sort of banged his drums a bit, right? And that was it, right? And suddenly we had sort of gotten the whole sort of thing together. So what I'm meaning with this story is you basically never know, right? If we would have guessed beforehand, would that drummer ever say something intelligent at all, let alone helping us writing a song? No, never. But he did, right? I mean, I'm not wanting to diss drummers here, right? But I mean, mostly drummers just drum, right?
It's an unfortunate stereotype, but yes.
yeah. I mean, there's brilliant exceptions, right? Like Phil Collins, who started as a drummer, right? So it's
like Ringo.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a stereotype. So it's, but I mean, in our particular band, this stereotype also happened to be almost completely true. So, I mean, he was a great drummer, right? So no biggie. I mean, that's what he did. And this is kind of the fun part with the community, where you can sort of then suddenly discover that one person at a particular juncture for a couple of weeks, they just post about their own stuff, right? And that might at times almost be experienced as if annoying. I mean, I can give you a concrete example again. I mean, Giorgio Bettini is a lovely guy. He has a wealth of material in his kind of online library. He knows tons of stuff about dialectical space, about constructivism, about complexity and learning, tons of stuff, right? It's just that he has never sort of figured out how to sort of engage in kind of just open, full, ongoing conversations because he's not the type, right? So I've been sort of encouraging him because I've sort of seen that some of the stuff he already knows tons about is actually helpful for us sort of gearing up to sort of take the next step in the evolution of the conversation community itself. So I've been sort of wildly encouraging him, basically say, post to wild abandon. And if people give you flack for that, or if people kind of send me private messages, say, John, what's this crazy stuff? Is this actually part of the conversation community? I will take care of that. Just post away. And he did, right? And he's doing it. And even though some of that doesn't make a lot of sense to a great many of the other conversation members, it will. So those are kind of bridges for songs we haven't actually made yet, written yet. But we will, right? And once we do, they will come in very handy because we have sort of loads of sort of random notes lying about.
It's a kind of a sketchbook of, well, I could say musical ideas, or an artist's sketchbook, since the term is sketchbook, or in this, it's a kind of a, we can resort to it.
Yeah.
It'll be there in the community.
Yeah, I mean, perspectives matter a lot, right? Because it would be in a way true if we just see it from one particular point. We say George is pretty useless. He's only writing bridges, right?
Not really doing the conversation thing, right?
Oh, he's just cramming out stuff, right? I mean, bloody useless.
Bridges,
well,
you said bridges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but if we then add other stuff to it, and suddenly it begins to resonate, right?
Right. Yeah. Right. Those. Sometimes you need a bridge, and you just don't have one handy.
Yeah,
let me tell you.
I sometimes am really keen on writing about how we're going to hell in a handbasket, right? And how we're going to sort of make ourselves go extinct, right? And I'm kind of worrying about that. And you can see when I'm doing that, then I'm writing those posts that are themed Our Future Societies. So whenever John Kellner writes about Our Future Societies, part 54 or something, then you know that I'm worrying that if we are sort of going to sort of be so stupid, so we're actually going to sort of make ourselves extinct, right? But when I'm doing the other posts, and some of them are called Zen of Small Tasks, then you pretty much know that I'm kind of in a good funk, good flow, good productive mode, and I'm just cranking away at stuff, and I'm basically feeling more or less happy with myself because I'm just sort of, I'm not going to save the planet, at least not today, right? Today, I'm just working in my little corner of the universe, and the rest of the universe, I'm trusting to take care of their own business in whatever way they see fit, right?
So is this like reading your digital tea leaves?
Yeah, I mean, I can show you. I mean, I have my digital tea leaves kind of sorted in method cards.
I see. Okay.
So this is kind of, though these are the years of whacking the executives on the side of the head, right, and distilling their, because they asked me if there was a way that they could sort of do this more or less for themselves, without me having to sort of holding their hands and being clever all the time, right? I mean, executives have their sort of their beliefs and assumptions. They want to sort of be self-reliant and self-assured and know stuff, doing stuff by themselves, right? So it's a bit of a challenge all the time when they kind of hire me, right? But when I did those, they could sort of begin to take more ownership of the process. You could say that this is kind of a gamification of practical executive wisdom. So there's loads of things in those, and part of this helps with me writing blog posts, me figuring out patterns. Actually, the patterns is, not sure if you can still see me. My camera is kind of on the blink, I think. So anyway, the patterns that I'm talking about, patterns of interaction, patterns of production, of co-production, and so on, they are sitting sort of underneath these method cards, which I call them. I've been talking and posting extensively about this, and I'm happy to sort of talk more about that. So I'm not sure if you actually can hear me or see me anymore.
We can hear you and see you.
You're becoming slightly dimmer, not in your intellect, but in your lighting.
yeah, that was kind. Some light. And I got my camera back on as well, right? Fantastic.
We once did that in a Hangout, and the image kept getting darker, and I just thought there was something wrong or with my screen or whatever. We just kept talking until it was completely dark.
Yeah, I mean, I could show you another one and see the hold on.
Oh, yeah.
It's lagging in my camera.
Still, that's the key. There we go.
Here we go. Perfect. Try that again.
That's good. It's almost capable of getting a screenshot.
Yeah, and I mean these. I mean, I can read this one, right? This little card is called conversation, and then the text is basically just conversations initiate transactions. So all by itself, it doesn't amount to any which kind of hill of beans, right? But taken together with the other cards, they become pointers to those sort of obvious ways of resolving wicked problems.
Did you say conversation? Do what?
Conversations initiate transactions.
Transactions.
Now,
oh yeah.
So this, I mean, I can give it a particular situation in which this card got spawned, so to speak. It was a particular executive team. They were sort of busy doing conversations, or so they thought. But in truth, they sort of just were stuck inside their own mental models, inside their own heads, inside their own talking points. So there were no sort of foundation, no safe foundation for transactions in between the people in the team. But when they switched, at least the very first beginning switch from communication to conversation, they began to transact among each other. They began to share stories, share insights, share context, share in a way that others could relate to, right? And that's when I was kind of really listening with all my senses, and I jotted this very quickly down. And at this sort of very inflection point when I'm working with clients, if I can sort of listen really well to them and then feed this card back to them at that exact moment, it changes things, right? It flips. So the whole dynamic changes. And it's palpable in the situation that when people see that, wow, I can actually pretty much say the things I needed to say, but if I hold a more inclusive intention, the transaction just sort of flows out of it. And sometimes it's just minute changes, right? Sometimes it's just a matter of switching intention from I'm just sticking to my agenda and holding my own exclusive intention to, let's see if we can hold a slightly more inclusive intention, as if the others are people. And mind you, they don't even need to sort of believe that the other people are actual people. They just have to pretend as if they are to begin with, right? And still the dynamic changes. So, and
John,
these cards. Sorry,
John, forgive me.
No
I couldn't read this. I've had the experience of working with a metronome or click track, and a lot of people have trouble with it. And I found out that the way to get over the trouble was just to imagine that it's one of the musicians. And immediately I don't have any trouble with it then. Like sometimes they use a click track in a recording session. So it's just like that. It's exactly like what you just said.
Yeah. I mean, there's also this, I mean, my instrument is the violin, right?
Yes.
I mean, it took me in between 1-2 years to figure out, and for my brain to sort out, that with my left hand fingers I'm pressing down the strings, right? And with my right hand I'm handling the bow. But once you've done that, it just works, right? So this is kind of where
you're not thinking about the technique very much.
No, I mean it becomes second nature, right? So it's But if I would have to change,
Yeah.
it would be enormously difficult, right? So this is kind of where the same way that our brain operates, in terms of having developed these number of patterns inside our brain, so actually enables it to play music. If we then have to switch to a different pattern. So even though on the surface level of things, conversations initiate transactions, well, that's way too simple. That can't possibly work. Well, it can, because they need to be very small and minute changes. You can't just say to executives, right, now you need to behave as a decent human being. That's impossible, right? Because they have 20, 30 years of being a bastard, right? So it's kind of thoroughly ingrained, and lots of their outer external sort of prestige, monies, perks, executive thingies, whatnot, right? Status hinges on them continuing being a self-absorbed bastard. So just telling them that stop being that, right? Stop being an asshole, right? Well,
You know, about stopping being an asshole.
yeah, it's easy for us to say, right? But the poor schmuck that is going to actually sort of make good on that kind of change, it's really, really difficult, right? But because, I mean, these guys get rewarded to the tune of a couple of $1 million per decision sometimes, right? For being that. But what I've seen work again and again and again, if you can sort of introduce changes that are so small, so they're sort of bordering on not noticeable, discernible, that actually works. So this, I mean, I won't go into the full complexity of things. I mean, the criticality of systems way beyond what's it called? Balance. I mean, the whole neocortex is kind of a Bayesian chaotic computing little machine, right? It's used for strange stuff at any given moment. So if we feed it with what Buckminster Fuller would say, trim tabs, small catalysts, smallest adjustments, right? And then we can sort of get the whole thing to sort of change all by itself almost.
John.
And then, yeah, go on.
You know, I used to be in Australia, and now I am in Turkey. I recently moved to Turkey, and I had really good days in Australia in terms of socializing. Australians get together sometimes in their backyards, have little parties. You start drinking, and you know, I'm talking about honesty in conversations. Sometimes the best way to make people honest is to make them smoke some joint. And we used to get together and drink and smoke and really come down to our basics and start playing drums. It used to be so much fun. And, you know,
Yeah.
the bringing the human down to the basics is very important, but we are so tied up and we are so stiff most of the time that relaxing and coming down to being a natural human is very difficult.
Yeah. There's a great story here.
Great point.
Sure, go on.
Yeah,
go on,
good
Chris.
point.
Yeah.
I was just saying, we're terminally sophisticated, so.
Yeah, I mean, there's a wonderful interview in Sweden, a woman, and she has interviewed almost anyone, anything from Margaret Thatcher to Dalai Lama and everyone in between. And she had kind of a gimmick, sort of building her brand, right? So she always jumped high up in the air to end every program, and she had the interview subject sort of jump in the air at the end of every program. And Dollar thought it was great fun, so he jumped and he just sort of laughed and laughed, right? I mean, you can just sort of immediately see that no matter what we sort of think about religions or spiritualities or whatever, we can sort of immediately infer that, well, Dalai Lama is a great guy, right? Because he jumped and he jumped, right? And he just thought it was great fun. There was just one out of, I think it was a couple of thousand people she interviewed. So Margaret Thatcher, she just flat out refused. Right? She wouldn't jump, right?
Well, that's
Now,
because she was the Iron Lady. She was too heavy to jump.
yeah, I mean, from her point of view of her view of the universe, right? Then the rest of the world moves according to her commands, right? Not the other way around, right?
It's Maggie-centric.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm always grateful, right? Because then I have sort of my completely subjective judgments on Margaret Thatcher that she's basically just a piece of something, and I have that validate, right? And but I think there's a deeper point also to be made, that this was just a whim, right? But she sort of hit something really important. That jump. I mean, this goes for me all the way back to Alfred Adler, right? When he says kind of trust only movement.
Mm.
But again, my context. These executives. If I would say, let's just have a gig, right? Let's play some music. Sometimes that is too big of a leap, too big of a change, right?
Yeah.
Although they would, some of them would love doing that. I mean, to tell you, I have had some clients in private, one-on-one, sort of just breaking down and cry like little boys, right, when I'm talking with them. And that's really not a good thing. That's kind of those moments when I'm sort of too persuasive, too good at my job, too good at kind of this sort of transformation thingy, right? So even though some of them have thanked me for it afterwards, it's still not a good thing, right? So in terms of business philosophy, I'm more of a Taoist persuasion, right? When they say afterwards, excellent, we did it ourselves, then I've done a great job as a facilitator, right? Because I sort of have just nudged Nia imperceptibly, invisibly, right? So I'm kind of handing it kind of as quickly as possible over the power back to them, right? So this is also explaining why sometimes there's been sort of kerfuffles, waves, stuff happening in the conversation community. And sometimes you see me weighing in very quickly, and sometimes you see me not weighing in at all. It's just that I'm making kind of a very sort of quick, intuitive judgment. There seems to be 3 grown-up adults having a kerfuffle. Great stuff. It means that they care. Let them have it at each other for a while. Let's chew each other up for a bit, and then they will all grow wiser for it. But sometimes when I'm noticing, and this is again just subjective, right? I'm frequently wrong. Sometimes I'm making a judgment that this is a high status person taking it out on a slightly lower status person in the community. Then I'm immediately firing a private message to the high status person, stop doing that. This is a smaller person, and you should sort of not doing that. I mean, so this is kind of just a kind of sneak preview of what sort of goes on sometimes sort of behind the scenes, right? And thankfully, there's actually very little of that going on. And I mean, this speaks volumes about the sheer quality of people once they are figuring out that. I mean, again, this Howard Rheingold thing, right? What it is up to us. So a lot of the secret magic ingredient is just that, right? I'm sort of making good on that sort of statement. But it takes some. It's not a kind of cure-all. It's not a panacea. I actually did throw out 4 or 5 people, right? Because they didn't give a flying F about other people. And after a while, it sort of gets too costly, right? Too risky. So, but in order to understand me, these people can at any time just say, John, I was being a prick. Can I be let back in? And I will let him back in. Right? It's just that one of these guys called me kind of a dangerous psychopath in his kind of whole Facebook circles, and it will probably take some doing before he kind of wants to sort of be let back in, right? I mean, this is again Howard Rheingold called this. Some people inside brainstorms they believe that they need to drop a big turd and then they leave, right? But I mean, honestly, you don't. So I'm happy with having people, because it comes with the kind of the role I'm playing, right? I need to sort of be happy with people projecting all kinds of stuff, the good and the bad, right? And it's just how it is. And anyone who has ever been a manager, a project manager, everyone who has ever had kids knows with precision that this is kind of par for the course, and that's kind of just how life is, right? And it's basically nothing to worry about. But since we are new at these sort of digital literacies, how we sort of behave whilst on these platforms, so we don't and we shouldn't have to sort of drop turds, right? We can just sort of say kind of a, John, I think you're kind of just completely off the rocker. I'm going to, right? And that's kind of fine, right? I mean, if anything, if some people have sort of too high expectations on me, right, then that's not a good thing either. I mean, but projections are really complex, right? It's really difficult. I can't tell you that because it's what we do, right? We make snap instant judgments. We make kind of guesstimates, assumptions on our people, and things like that. So it's just how it is. But anyway, to sort of see if I can sort of sum this up, because I'm seeing that we are kind of going on. I will write some of these things up. I've enjoyed the conversation immensely. There's come out some good stuff from it. I will put some timestamps in so we'll be able to find some select parts. Manny said something really important here in the chat. See, the end goal is a productive, co-supported group. There's room for bumping into each other, but overall we'll keep moving forward, step by evolving step. That was really brilliantly put. Thanks, Manny. I mean, those are kind of the as good as closing words as any, right? But I mean, the production can also be really fun. I mean, music, co-producing sweet music, even if it's just posts and products and services and artifacts. So you could say that seen from a particular angle, seen just so, the dynamic synopsis is kind of the very first very first draft of kind of an operating system, a manual of sorts, out of which we will be able to do the project mixtape and loads of other things. But as it is right now, it's a bit of a behemoth of a text. But we'll get there. We'll get there. I mean, so feel free to sort of add any sort of closing words, and then I'm just going to sort of press the little, which is now the red button, and then I'm going to end this.
It was just by happenstance that I wound up in this Hangout today. I was just searching through the events and found you.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So
Power
it was very
serendipity. Yeah. And I mean, if you're not a member of the conversation community already, then I mean, feel free to join.
I will check it out. Thank you so much.
Great having you.
Great meeting you, Christopher.
Yeah, Ron, go ahead.
Just great meeting you, Christopher.
It's a great pleasure. I used to play French horn, and I was also a great Beatles fan. I went from Beatles to Bach and from Beach Boys to Beethoven. So.
That was a great decision.
More B words.
All the right B words.
All the right B words. And Brahms. Don't forget Brahms.
Yes. Yeah.
Took me years to learn how to appreciate Brahms, but I got there.
Once you've played Brahms, I think that makes a big difference in terms of. I used to accompany Yo-Yo Ma and Lin Chang when I was in the Harvard Orchestra, and we did a tour with them. And that's where I developed a great appreciation for Brahms.
Yeah. I mean, it's
what a super group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beethoven was also an acquired taste, right?
Not for me. I had instant resonance with Beethoven.
No, I mean, but Mozart. I mean, I can almost kind of hum along to those, even those I haven't really heard. So it's really weird. I mean, I'm really resonating a lot with Mozart. Not sure why, but I'm just and in terms of Beatles, I go through stages, right? Sometimes I almost always only listen to the 1962 to 64. Sometimes I'm only listening to Revolver and Rubber Soul. Sometimes I'm only listening to the Abbey Road medley. So I'm really weird when it comes to Beatles. But I mean, we are kind of all weird in some way or other, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I still believe that they made some epochal stuff.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I used to listen. I used to listen on the radio, AM radio, as a child, and wait for the next song to be released. So.
Yeah. I mean, I had the kind of great luxury of my older brother, who is kind of 12 years older. He had all the records on vinyl, right? Every last single one. So I'm actually too young. I was born '62, so I'm actually too young to be a Beatles fan, right? Since I had older siblings, I sort of grew up with all of those. And as I said, I never stopped listening to them, really.
Well, I'm a '58 vintage, so I was just about old enough. So.
Yeah, I mean, you.
I was old enough for sure. I was there for the invasion.
For the invasion.
The British invasion. Yeah.
Of Google Plus. Oh no, the British invasion. Okay.
Yeah. So great having you, and I'm just going to do something that my friend Jerry has taught me, kind of. And when I asked him what this means, because Jerry is one of those clever guys, and I sort of thought, is there some secret thing with this? No, it's mad waves, he said.
Waving madly.
Yeah.
Madly.
Okay.
Or raise the roof.
Yeah. First kind of and then this, right?
You can cross generations that way.
Yeah. Great stuff. Okay, thanks much, and talk soon. Bye.
Bye.